The series. In this video I want to talk about brushes and kind of flesh that out a little more and how you can use it to your advantage to change the look of your papers, add some cool effects. And then I also want to talk about patterns briefly and just some, again, neat things that you can do with that. So let's start with this tan paper I have. I'm just going to switch over to the brush tool, which the shortcut key again is B. So if I hit B, it'll bring up my brush, and I can instantly just paint with my brush. You see that it painted black. That's the front swatch here, and the edges are very feathered. We've just been using brushes very minimally up to now, just helping us with adjustments and applying things in layers. But this time I want to talk about the actual brush. So here we have a line. You remember we can change the size of our brush with the bracket keys. So if I use the left bracket key, I can make it smaller. Right bracket key, I can make it bigger. If you need to like center your brush over a specific thing or click and make a special size dot, you can use the caps lock key and toggle from this like brush icon to a crosshair, and then that way you can click specifically in a spot. So again, that's the caps lock key, so that just toggles. So that's helpful to know. If you come up, any of the tools on the left have their own context menu. Just depends on what tool you're using. So this is the brush menu. This second icon has a drop down arrow. If you click on it, you can change the size here as well if you don't want to use the bracket keys. Right now it's 300 pixels, so if you wanted it smaller, you can drag it smaller. If you want to just type in a number, you can. Just click enter, and now we're back to 300. You can also change the hardness. So like right now we've been at a hardness of 0, and that means that it feathers the edge. And you can like go from anything from 0 to 100 to where the edge is very hard. The other thing you can change is the actual type of brush that you're using. So right under here at the bottom, there's different folders. There's 4 by default. Here's your general brushes. This is what we've been talking about. Dry media is another set. So here's like pencils and charcoal. Here's like chunky charcoal. So if I like click this one and get rid of these other things, I can drag and show you that it looks very different than our regular paintbrush. This is a good brush to show you some of these other things. So we talked previously about these blending modes. You can apply them to layers, or you can apply it to your brush that you're doing. When you are brushing, it's probably a good idea to do it in a new layer so that you can keep everything separate. So let me go back, and I'm just going to brush a line. Opacity, you can change opacity of an entire layer, or you can change the opacity of your brushing in real time. So if I change the opacity to like a quarter, like around 25%, and I paint, it's going to be mostly transparent. So it's like a quarter of what it was. There's also this thing called flow. If you change the flow of something, you're changing like the amount of ink that comes out. So if I move that down to a quarter and I paint, you're going to see it's not as heavy. So that's another way to customize a brush. If you increase the size of a brush, you can kind of see more of like the pattern. And when I click, you can see it's like reorienting so that it like creates more of a random pattern. So that's cool to know. I'm going to keep this flow down pretty low. I'm going to click on the swatch, and I'm going to change the color. Pick something brown. Yeah, that's fine. Click OK. And I'm just going to draw something. So there you go. Let's look at some other brushes. I'm going to hit Command Z. Go back to this menu. I'm going to undo that. There's wet media brushes. This is like, so like for example, if I have some ink on a page, Some of these are like blenders, so that means they don't actually put out ink themselves when I click, but they will smear ink as if I'm making an oil painting. So that could be kind of fun. Let me get rid of the wet media brushes. There's like special effects brushes, spatters. These are kind of fun. So if I go back to this paper, I have a flow of 100% right now. If I draw, you can see it's just like speckles. I can change the flow down to a lower number, make the brush a little bigger, and add like speckles all over the paper. Make it look like it's aged or just dirty. So that's kind of cool. And again, you're not limited by what's here. There's actually more brushes that you can play with, that you can download from Adobe's website. So if you come up to the settings here, you can see get more brushes. It comes with your subscription, so you don't have to pay extra to download these. So here we'll download one just as an example. So there's like fall brushes. Here's the dry media. I think that's the one we already have by default. There's like watercolor, mega pack, spatter. That's kind of what we were just using to dot the paper. Here's like cross hatches, rake brushes. What is this? Letterers. Produce calligraphy, signage, comic dialogues. So that's interesting. As a brush. Let's see, halftones. I feel like the amount of options are endless. And again, some people use Photoshop primarily as something to draw with and make art. So you can go down as far as you want down the rabbit hole. We're just going to play with cross hatchers. I'm going to download this. Again, it's a free download. I'm going to go to the same menu where I was, click settings, and then you just import brushes. And it's in my downloads folder. As soon as you do that, it adds it right here. So if I open this up, you can now see there's a lot of different new brushes we have. Let's see, which one do we want to play with? So let's see. Let's pick this one. I have the flow on 100%. I'll increase the size a little bit. So there, it kind of looks like the hair on like a child's drawing. Let's see, what else could you do? So anyway, different kinds of things. Let's see, here's like a little more of the crosshatch look. That's kind of fun. And you could probably click individually and, make something more intentional if that's what you want. So anyway, that is brushes. I want to go ahead and move on now and talk about some different patterns. So in the past we talked about briefly when we talked about tools, there's a pattern stamp tool, and I think we had talked about making like a selection and then painting in some of this grass. So there's like different preset. There's like trees and grass. I think we had painted some grass on a brick. Of course you can again play with the flow, the blending mode, the opacity. But let me talk more about customizing this. So you can use the pattern stamp tool. There's also a way to make your own custom stamps. So let me open a file. Let's say that you took stamps at home and you scanned them, or you found like outlines like this, or put your own color on things. I'm just gonna grab one of these leaves, blow it up, use the eraser, erase this other stuff I don't want, crop this down a little bit more. Okay. Now, let's say I wanted to fill it in with like this brown. I can go to my little paint bucket and just click, and I now filled in the leaf with brown. If I wanted to delete the background, I could. Let's see. I need to unlock this layer to do that. Double click, rename it, magic wand tool, select the background, delete. Right now this is a JPEG. To keep the background transparent, you have to use like a PNG or like a Photoshop document. So I'm just gonna save this really quickly as, let's just do, yeah, well, we could leave it as Photoshop, I suppose. Just gonna call it leaf. Okay, I'm gonna deselect. Now I'm gonna go to a selection tool. If you have a selection tool active, you can go through and select the whole thing like this. Or another shortcut is you can hit Command A and it'll select all. I'm gonna come up to, let's see, Edit, Define Pattern, and we can just call it leaf, that's fine. And there we go, we have a new pattern. You can see colors, swatches, gradients, patterns at the top. So here's like the grass that we saw before, and here's our custom one we just added. So now that's under patterns. If I go back to my other paper, again, you can use the pattern stamp tool. And if you just start, well, let me switch to the leaf. If you just start drawing, it will draw all these leaves on your paper. And because we deleted the background, it deleted, it allows the paper behind it to show through. So right now you can see the brush I'm using is very soft because it's got this feathered edge. If you don't like that, you can change the brush hardness to 100, and then when you paint, it's a little more specific. If you don't like a certain thing, you can go back in with the eraser. Again, if you create this in its own layer, you can go in and customize it. If I switch to an eraser right now and try to erase these, I might erase some of these dots that I did earlier. So honestly, it'd be better to work in a separate layer so that you have more control. Leaves. And now if I paint and I bring up my eraser tool, I can erase and not erase these dots because it only is erasing in the current layer that I'm working in. So another thing that you can do, so that's if you use the pattern stamp tool. Another thing you can do with patterns, if you go to Edit, Fill, we saw this before when we went to Content Aware. There was like a picture of some people and a mountain, and we had selected one of the guys and made the computer basically delete him and fill it in with what it thought should be there. That was Content Aware. It's a very powerful feature. You can fill with other things. One option is pattern. And we can select like the custom pattern that we have. Click OK and it will fill the entire layer with that pattern. But let's say you did that with a selection. So let's say you had like a little card. You just do the same thing, edit, fill. If you click that, it'll fill in the selection. Okay, so that's pretty basic, right? Well, there's some cool things to do with this fill feature if you select this script. There's different types of scripts. They all do different things. So like, for example, one is called random fill. It's kind of neat. If you click OK, you get a bunch of options. So you can change, for example, you see like there's all types of colors. If I move this down, color randomness to 0, they will all be the same color. If I allow Photoshop to make some tweaks to color, you can see a little bit of variation. If I increase, there's more variation. If you go too far, then it might like pick really odd colors. So let's just pick something like that. Here is density. You can pick what density of leaves you want. If I want a bunch of leaves, I can fill the whole screen with leaves if I so desire. Minimum and maximum scale factor. This is like changing the size of the original leaf. So down to 50% of the original size, up to 175%. If you want it to just all be the same size as the original, you can change this to 1, and then there won't be any size difference. It's not displaying that preview right now. Well, there we go. So they'll almost all be the same size. If you want some to be smaller, then you can do that. This rotate, so this orientation it was originally in, this allows it to look more random. And then you can even change the brightness of the different things if you want just a little bit more variation. And when I click OK, it will apply the leaves all over the screen. So you can do some cool things with that. So like I said, it's kind of like something you can bring in your own stamp, color it the way you want, and play around with all these effects to make some interesting looking papers. So I'm going to go back to Edit Fill. Let's see, if I wanted to do the same thing but then make it not so dense. Let's say I just did 0.4 and I want it to be, I don't know, pretty small. Let's do that and click OK. Now we have just, a few leaves scattered all over the project. So that's cool to me. I like that. There is other options. Like I said, you can play with them. I feel like I can go on and on about these things. Under scripts, another one's called spiral. And it kind of does what it sounds like. It makes a spiral. And you can increase or decrease the size. You can increase or decrease the spacing. So anyway, it's pretty cool. So there's an example. That's kind of neat. So that is patterns. I'm going to stop this there. So we've covered brushes and adding different effects with those, and then adding a pattern, creating custom patterns. Like I said, you can scan in all your different types of stamps and play around with those. There's just a lot of ways to spice up a project using these things. So until next time.